Part of my pitch, at least, is this idea that what we do with media is really the most critical thing relating to the future of humans on this planet at this point. And I think that's thing that's finally convincing people of this is to see how it's being misused at the present time, and history is being rewritten, and um, it's pretty dark. So, but the first thing we kind of like to do is clarify a bit what the term media means, because there is this sort of dual meaning that everybody uses it in this double way. That it can refer to the content, the actual things that people consume, the things that actually goes into people's brains, the images, sounds, etc. And then there's also media channels, like we talk about CNN or Fox News being the media, and that's the delivery system, of course. And so we're concerned about both, but ultimately it's what reaches people, and that's the whole point of all of our work, is to reach people, and particularly to have a great reach out into the mainstream world of humanity. Positive media, what does that actually mean? Um, we don't have a strict definition, but you've seen this graphic that it continues to evolve. So this is the latest iteration of it. Took away the reddish side on the left because some people said, it looks too political with red and blue, and this is not political. Um, but on the positive media side, it really begins with being truthful, and journalism is what informs us, what informs citizens in a democracy. So good journalism is extremely important. So we want it to include that space. Inspiring stories is a lot really of kind of the entertainment domain, but we'd like to see entertainment be both inspiring and fun and relaxing and everything else, but also, uplifting. It actually gives you something. And we sometimes forget that all of the knowledge of humanity, and science and what we convey through education is really part of media. And we'd like to see that being done better. And then finally, I think the space really we're all coming from is the unitive media or conscious media, that's really messaged around unity and compassion and peace and these kind of messages, which good journalism, for example, doesn't necessarily deal with any of that. So, but it's basically what's good for people, what helps people, and what liberates them and frees them, rather than the left side is really trying to kind of enchain people and captivate them, control them, deceive them, exploit, etc. So, partly what this project is about is conveying this sense of discernment about, just like with food, there's healthy things and unhealthy things, and same with media, and ultimately to get people to choose to make good choices in the media that they consume, because it is going straight into their brains. So our pain point, which I think we all know, is that there's a lot of good media being produced in our space, a lot of positive media, but it's just really not getting very far out into the mainstream world, and partly because it's such a huge, chaotic, crazy, predatory world that's out there. And everyone's trying to make a splash, and so how do you compete with that? And um, I think that what this is really about is we can't do it alone, and so the only way to go, and this is how nature works, and this is where the evolution of humans is to be forming these ecosystems. And so it's a media ecosystem that we're trying to create, that will become more powerful and really have a resonance that uh, ultimately has a major impact in the world. That is the dream. That is what we're all trying to do. But the point is, we have to come together in order to do this. So we're trying to build the container for it. So what exactly is a media ecosystem? Um, some of you are familiar with this slide from a ways back, but I resurrected it just to be clear. And I think that, people are understanding better and better that this is a very real thing. Call it the alt-right media ecosystem, but it's not just Fox News. It's the fact that all of these entities, even the Heritage Foundation, work together somehow. I don't know how it works, but they do work together. They coordinate, and they export out into the world a lot of negative stuff. And the final product really recently was the 77 million Trump voters, and I'm still convinced that Trump won because of media. It wasn't that there was really anything wrong with what Kamala stood for or the Democrats. They just got whooped in using media. So it's powerful and it really works. It is changing the course of history. But we can do better than that. We can create an ecosystem because we have better technologies available. Intellectually, I think we're better. I think we can have emotionally satisfying and uplifting messages and spiritually grounded. And ultimately, I think we have the moral high ground because we're advocating for everyone, for all people. It's not about the selfish means. So we have a great example of what a media ecosystem is. So our structure right now that we're envisioning the media ecosystem is in two parts. The purple oval is really the business, so it's a large circle here, but it's a members network that we have not yet created or invited people into, but it can be anyone that's involved in any way, shape, or form with creating positive media. So the requirement sort of is that you're committed to producing positive media, and you are willing and able to come into this culture. We're also trying to create I'll just call it a partnership culture, where we really are working together. We're willing to share our secrets and our resources for the greater cause, which is advancing humanity. It's not just so that we can be better. I feel strongly that when this is up and running, that it will make everyone better. Whatever anyone's trying to do themselves, you'll be doing it better, but you'll be part of something, really serving a higher cause. The black oval is like a management entity or a service entity, of organization of some kind. We haven't decided, probably close to deciding that, but maybe a nonprofit that just provides services, funding. Ultimately, we'll dig into that a little bit more in just a bit here. So there's two parts to it, and then the third piece is sort of the entry point or the portal, which public facing will be a website that there is something there already at that URL. But that will be the way that you find out about it. And if you want to join, there will be a form, some basic information. And then when you are a member, there will be a login so that this members network, it's not a public space. It's for members only. It will be very inclusive, but we don't want it to be a public space. So there's, in a sense, three parts to this. So the members network, what we envision it being able to support is, first of all, members will have some kind of visibility in the form of a profile. They can be found. And one of the challenges right now that Amanda and her team are working on is, what is the technology to support this? We don't feel that any of the off-the-shelf things like Hilo or Mighty Network really are adequate. So eventually these profiles could be, create your own, however you want to be seen. And there could be video content or whatever things there are. But ultimately it's to create communications and mutual learning, groups that are holding the inquiry. We call it a lab because it's not something we're building that has all the answers. The inquiry is, how can we work together to amplify our reach and impact? Always that's the question. What can we do together and figure that out? Because, it's an unsolved problem that we're going to solve. But the ability to share resources, have asset libraries, ultimately to amplify what we're doing. The activities will undoubtedly be a lot of Zoom initially, a lot of different groups. One of the early things will be to have various members just do a presentation on what their work is and what they do and what they can offer and what they can need or what they do need. So there'll be very much of sort of a culture of offers and needs, of reciprocity. Coordinated campaigns is something that I think will be really at the heart of this. And in some recent conversations in the last couple of days, partly around Rian's work with partnership and gender equity, and also with all the Epstein saga going on, here's an idea that came up as an example of a campaign. A campaign maybe we call it "How to Be a Good Man," and imagine all the messaging you could put out around that in all kinds of channels, from TV ads to TikTok to the Instagram, and just have that blasting out in multiple places. There's a good 10 or so campaigns like that. So that's what we mean by coordinated campaigns. I really see that as one of the first areas of work that we can really move into. I'd like to have a lot of expert speakers coming in. I mean, people that are at the leading edge in their fields of how you do social media or, how you craft good stories. And we have a lot of possibilities. And members are just free to attend these. And we'll just have a listing in our platform, like here's the upcoming offerings to jump into. We'll probably have synergy or affinity groups around certain topics. One might be men's issue, another one might be the sacred feminine, another one might be indigenous wisdom, and holding that inquiry of how can we get this out in the world better, and sharing the tricks of the trade, the best secrets, the best practices, and developing the strategies for amplifying reach and influence. And also to be able to aggregate data across all of our channels. And instead of, you have your own metrics for what you're doing, when we start to put that together, we get an even bigger picture of what's working, what's not, what's landing well, how do we need to change things. And so these are things we envision happening within the network. The service entity or the organization, this would be the legal entity, would undoubtedly have a sort of board and staff structure. I would say right at this point, our leadership team or executive group or board or whatever you want to call it is Amanda, Kurt, and me. We're just kind of the ones that are still standing. A lot of different people have been involved and are still more loosely involved, but we're the ones kind of at the center of it. One of the important functions of this entity would be to fundraise, to find the money and manage it and all that. And then a lot of it to funnel into the members network, to fund projects, to pay young creators, and ultimately to have very high level funding. In order for this to work, it has to be at the highest level where we have very big players funding it and involved. So we have very high aspirations, very big visions of what this needs to be. We would just provide services, whatever is needed to support the members network, whether it's facilitation of groups or managing the membership, having AI available and supporting all of this. So many other possible things that in support. So together then, The ultimate effect then is positive media out to the world in huge amounts. So then putting it all together, we have the network, the support structure, the website entry point, and then basically funding flows into the network. And a couple other things that I think are important. And one, and I know Rick has thought about this a lot, of media literacy, of just teaching people to be discriminating and how to make critical evaluation of their media and get better at seeing through, recognizing deception, and then to end up ultimately for positive media to be just like health food. When you say that, people know what that means. They say, oh, yeah, I want that. And so the positive media becomes a household word or a movement, or and that we only have positive media someday. There'd be no reason for doing harmful things with media, deceptive things. So this sort of strategy, very broadly, high level, is first of all to take what's already being done by in our space and our members and figure out how to support and amplify that, because there's a lot already being done. And then as we have more funding and in time to launch new projects, new forms of media, maybe have funding for full-length feature films, maybe be working with Disney Studios, who knows? But to be funding bigger projects that don't exist right now. And I just threw this slide in. This is the last one. This is from my organization, having to do with our messaging. And when we talk about, what is the overall agenda, and we like the term the Great Transition, and to really teach people about that this train wreck that's going on in the world right now. This is just the first phase of a transition, and transition always has three phases. The ending, the in between, and the beginning. And so, as we all know, we're all trying to create this new world, and that's the ultimate agenda. And we kind of like to focus on these three mimetic shifts, as we call them, from domination to partnership, from separation to unity, and from exploitation to caring. And so this would all be eventually part of the messaging. This might be where my organization has something to contribute. So, okay. Maybe before I leave the slides here, does anyone have a question about any of the slides, or want to, before we move on to Amanda?
I'll just make one quick comment, and that is that when we're using the term we don't mean the three of us and a bunch of others who've been doing this. We mean the we of the community that we're a part of. So that's actually you and everybody who can be a part of this. We're actually working on behalf of our evolutionary leaders community and this dream about what we can actually do together. So that we is not sometimes the usual we of the people who are leading this. There is really, in that sense, no leader. We're trying to serve a much bigger purpose and bring a plurality of players into that, so that this really would have full potential. So just that comment.
Good point. Okay, I'm going to go off share. And all yours, Amanda.
So Roger covered, a lot of topics, so I won't cover too much. I'm working on a similar version of the deck, but that's more aimed for professional investors. So you just present the information differently in that realm. But there are a couple of slides that I have that aren't parallel anything that Roger's already covered. So I'll just show those couple of slides. One of them is this idea that media is a lot of things to a lot of people. So we talked about the definition between the content and the channels, But if you are actually from the film industry and we are talking to you and we're saying media and you're thinking film, 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 right? And maybe, a little bit outside of that, maybe, journalism or whatever else that you've had a lot of direct access to. But media is actually traditionally defined by these 12 segments. And we want to approach this fully holistically from the beginning. And so we have an intentional eye on really making sure that we're serving all 12 segments from the beginning, that we are having representation from all 12 segments, and that we are really approaching media in its wholeness rather than from one specific viewpoint and growing from there. And then the same thing is true geographically. So, there's always a choice between land and expand strategies versus, holistic global strategies or whatever geography. We are intentionally going global first. So we have segmented the world into the different regions and subregions using the UN's M49 standard, which is ISO 3166. And we are keeping an intentional eye on making sure that all of our services and our members and our ideas and our perspectives and our launches are looking at serving each of those regions and subregions specifically until they get large enough to have basically their own gravity, their own flywheel, to be able to take it forward without us having to be intentional and make sure that this is truly global and not accidentally Americentric or Eurocentric or, something like that you can sort of accidentally fall into if you're not intentional. So that's sort of my little addition to what Roger's already shown.